Thank you all for joining our inaugural episode of the President's Interview Series, a conversation with Chairman Yongmaan Park. We are honored that Chairman Park is joining us today to discuss his distinguished career, as well as challenges surrounding the U.S. Korea economic partnership post-pandemic. Hello, I am Tom Byrne, the President and CEO of the Korea Society located in New York City. The Korea Society's new initiative, President's Interview Series, invites corporate leaders and industry experts to discuss issues related to business, finance, and economics in the U.S. Korea relationship. This new initiative will also explore the economic and social values of leading Korean and multinational companies in the U.S. and Korea. For our first episode, we have invited one of the most influential corporate leaders in business communities in the U.S. and Korea, Mr. Yongmaan Park, Chairman of Doosan Infracore. Doosan is the oldest Jabil family-led conglomerate in Korea. Its roots date back to 1986 with founding chairman Sungjik Park, opened Korea's first modern store, the original entity of Doosan. I understand that was in Seoul at Jongno Saga. Doosan, the meaning of Doosan is little grains of sand that together make a mountain. A graduate of Seoul National University and Boston University, Chairman Park has been in the front and center of Doosan's transformation from a business goods company to an infrastructure support, business-focused enterprise. Doosan has operations in 38 countries with over 50% of its 33,000 employees working overseas. Doosan has had seven-fold revenue growth in just over a decade. Chairman Park has also served as chairman of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, otherwise known as KCCI, from 2013 to 2021. He has served as an executive board member of the International Chamber of Commerce and was a member of Business Advisory Council of APEC, the premier Asia-Pacific Economic Forum, from 2018 to 2021. Now he has an honorary role as honorary chairman of KCCI. During his time at KCCI, the coronavirus pandemic swept into Korea, and Chairman Park was instrumental in promoting new industries, reforming regulations to foster a startup ecosystem for Korea's future talents. Such efforts will help the Korean economy recover even faster from the effects of unemployment and the downturn in international trade from the pandemic. Chairman Park's dedication and contribution to enhance the commercial ties between Korea and other countries is widely recognized. His awards include the Order of Civil Merit of Spain in 2003, the Order of Leopold II of Belgium in 2009, Commander of the Order of the Star from the Italian government in 2016, the Gold Tower Industry Award from the Korean government in 2012, and last but not least, in 2014 and in 2020, Chairman Park received the Van Fleet Award from the Korea Society for his significant contributions to the promotion of U.S.-Korea commercial relations. Chairman Park, I'm very excited to have you join us today and can't wait to hear about your valuable experiences and insights. Chairman Park, I see that you studied in the U.S., earning your MBA from Boston University in 1982. What was that experience like?
Well, although I graduated undergraduate in also business administration in Korea, the graduate study in Boston University was a whole new game. Because simply because there are two different ways of teaching in the university in Korea and in United States. When I was in Korea in SNU, I was more concentrated on studying the theories of business administration and management. While when I was in Boston University, I was more concentrated on case studies. So in the long story short, that the education at Boston University was closer to the real world of business, that I can say. Right. But overall, I learned more from my stay in the United States from the society of the US than in school. Because as you know, Korea, I grew up until that time. We were on the dictatorial government ruling all the time. So when I moved to United States and get the taste of U.S. society, it was a whole new experience for me. I had the opportunity to form a new sense of freedom and democracy, and also what advanced society like United States is like. For example, what kind of rule of game is important in advancing the society, and also the trust that respecting the rule is more important than making the result. This kind of thing was very important lesson for me from the experience of living in the United States.
That's very interesting. So you were here in the 1980s. That's when I got my history right. President Reagan was.
Yes, I went to the United States in the summer of 1979.
Right.
And left the United States in the summer of 1986.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you came at that in that decade, because nowadays I think politics are more partisan and maybe more poisonous too. So I think you saw a good window of the U.S. Society and political culture back then. So good timing on that part. I also noticed that you recently published a book. Even the Shadow is Part of Life. Kunul Kajido Insang Iniga. Did you talk about your experience as a student, and particularly as an international student, and as you said, your key takeaways as an international student? Does your book cover that part of your life?
Oh, yes, I covered that part briefly, but I tried to cover more on the issue of the different cultures, the culture in Korea and culture in global community. So I tried to show more of the differences. So the message I was trying to relay was that we need to globalize a bit further, because Korea is already part of the global community. We are, member of the OECD nation, so we need to upgrade how we do things, especially in the area of businesses. That was my key message in my book.
Right. Good. And then you're talking about business. Could you share with us your accomplishments at Doosan when you were a business leader in Doosan?
Doosan is the oldest company registered in Korea. We are 125 years old company. And we used to be a consumer product group up until 1995. And that's the time when our group went into a difficulty. So, but at the same time, I became a chief of corporate center in the fall of 1995. So since the company was on the lot of strain, I had to immediately launch a major restructuring effort at that time. So since then, I led the effort of restructuring for the whole Doosan Group, including changing the portfolio from consumer product portfolio to mechanical manufacturing portfolio. And also, the Doosan has been traditionally a domestic company. 97% of our sales is from Korea. And I turned that into a global company, which includes 70% of annual turnover is from the global market now. So overall, I led those restructuring effort of Doosan Group. And also I served as the chairman of the board of the whole group from 2012 to 2016. And then I stepped down from the chairman of the board of the Doosan Group in 2017, and then until now, I serve as chairman of Doosan Infracore. So that's what I have done so far in a very short summary.
Well, that's an awful lot. So you're the international investments, international business of Doosan. What role does the U.S. play in the international businesses of Doosan, or what are the other large markets for you internationally?
The during our globalization effort, we expand our business by acquisition of the corporations, which includes acquisition of the corporations in the United States as well as corporations in Europe. Talking about United States expansion, we acquired a company called Bobcat in 2007. That was the largest cross-border acquisition ever done in Korean corporations. And as you know, Bobcat is still strong. Is market leader with the #1 market share without any change. Very consistent leader in the market. So it was a very successful venture. And other than Bobcat, we mostly acquired companies with specific technologies, like fuel cell technologies or some power plant related technologies. So that was our story of expansion into the United States and investments.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have heard about Bobcat or have seen these machinery around. But years ago, I was surprised that it was Doosan that actually owned Bobcat. Somehow the name may not be too familiar to most Americans that Doosan does own Bobcat. Turning to, Doosan's listed on the stock exchange. Who are your, primary investors in Doosan? Is it mostly domestic, or do you have a sizable foreign investors who are interested in being part of the Doosan story?
We do have foreign investors, but most of our subsidiaries are publicly listed company in Korean stock market. But we do have some foreign investors among those shareholders. But percentage is varying from.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good. The Korean stock exchange has become over the years very popular for foreign investors. It's a large share of foreign investors who are in this Korea Stock Exchange. Turning to your 8 years as chairman of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, could you tell us what role KCCI plays in the Korean economy? I mean, some of us, particularly in the economics field, who maybe the name of FKI, the Federation of Korean Industries, is more well known. So what is the role of KCCI?
Yeah, well, the KCCI has about 190,000 members throughout Korea, which includes large corporation as well as small to medium enterprises as well. We're 135 years old organization, and it's the only legally registered business association, while the FKI is more like a private association of the businesses. And so our role of KCCI is that we try to work as a body to facilitate the dialogue between the government and the private enterprises, so that we help facilitating the development of the economy. And also we take the role of developing overseas market by being part of the government effort. As for example, whenever our Korean presidents and the government is visiting other countries having summit meeting, we always tag along and organize a business summit as well. So that's how we try to expand our businesses into foreign market. And also whenever we have a specific issue around business communities, for example, such as we have a export-import struggle with the Japanese government, right, and also COVID-19 crisis. In such cases, we try to mitigate problems that business enterprises are facing. So that's mostly the role of the KCCI. And I served as the chairman of the KCCI for 7 years and 8 months. And recently I stepped down from the position.
I noticed in reading about KCCI's activity, you have something called a Sandbox Support Center.
Mm.
I believe at least your role is unique internationally. Similar concepts are usually organized by the government, but you're doing this on your own. Could you tell our audience something about the Sandbox Support Center?
First of all, Korea has been industrialized and grew very fast, as you all know. We have done what the Western nations have done in 3 centuries in half a century. Mm-hmm. So this compressed growth has borne a bit of a problem for Korean economy, which is our economy outgrew the systems and process we have already. So the laws and regulations are falling behind while the business is growing and expanding very rapidly. So right now, our many part of our regulatory systems and legislations gets in the way of developing new businesses and expanding our businesses. So while the laws and regulations are catching up that progress, we need to allow the business to grow and startups to develop their businesses. So we developed the system called Sandbox, which defer the application of the regulations for 2 years, so that anybody who try to set up a new businesses and try new venture, which has a limitations because of the current regulations, they can go through the Sandbox and start the business on the market while we are updating our regulations for the 2 years. Most of those Sandbox system is managed by the government in other countries. But in our country, as you know, the speed is very important. KCCI make a recommendation to the government that why don't we open up a private window to facilitate those sandboxes, which is KCCI. And with the government blessing, and the President Moon has agreed to allow that to happen. So we were able to open up a private sandbox window at the KCCI. That was last year. And the result was phenomenal. For the first nearly 200 days of the operating Sandbox, we opened up nearly 160 new businesses, which was otherwise not so easy to do because of the current regulations.
Do you have any idea of what some of these promising businesses are, and what lines of business?
Many things like the technology which allows the bus to charging the batteries while they are running. Mm-hmm. And also, for example, that the wireless charging of the batteries, including handphones, computers, notebook, laptops, tablets as such, in any spaces where that has the charging hub. So, for example, if you run out of your battery, now what you do is that you plug it in right now. But using this technology, you just step into any coffee shop or supermarket and do your shopping. By the time you walk out, it's fully charged. So technology like that. And also that other technology, like we allowed the new businesses, which is operating the shared home for the youngsters. As you know, real estate price in Korea is very high. So the young people has a difficulty of securing the good housings on their own. So there's some businesses which start opening up dormitory-like residences for the young people. All of these new businesses was regulated by the existing regulations. Right. For example, the charging thing was regulated by the usage of those wireless transmissions, so which we defer by the Sandbox. And the developing dormitory-like residences, it was limited by the regulations on the housings and as such. So that was also deferred. So through the Sandbox, all of these businesses started able to start their businesses immediately. So that was very important. And the list goes on the small type insurance and also overseas investment or mini loaning businesses and as such. So the list goes on very extensive.
Do you have any idea whether any of these companies will be part of the effort by the Korean government to establish, I think, Songdo as a vaccine hub for Korea and the region?
It could. Why not?
Well, there's a lot of producing vaccines. I understand a lot more complicated than producing, say, therapeutic drugs, and it requires a lot of inputs, a lot of moving parts in producing a vaccine.
As you know, Korea has been already acting as a vaccine manufacturing hub to some extent. Many corporations, pharmaceutical companies in Korea are already producing vaccines for Nova and other companies as well. So we already have the capability of producing vaccines.
That's right. And what I understand is that you'll build on that capability, particularly to address the urgent needs for providing more coronavirus vaccines. So the key for this Sandbox to work then would be after the trial period where the regulations are eased or waived, that they're permanently eased or waived, or else the whole Sandbox concept will run into a dead end. Is that right? Is there any indication that the Korean government or the National Assembly would take a major policy initiative to deregulate?
Well, the Korean Assembly take the step to rectify this problem. So Sandbox was waived the restriction for 2 years. And once that 2 years expired, the companies can have extension of one more time. So which can be as long as 4 years. But within that 2 or 4 years, the regulation has to be changed. Otherwise, company has to stop doing business. So this was so limiting for the startups. So the National Assembly changed the law for that Sandbox thing. So they eased that more on that limited time limitation of 2 years. I think it was done about a couple months ago.
Right.
So they are trying very hard to catching up.
It seems like this would be something that would have bipartisan support in the National Assembly. Is that the case for both the ruling party and the opposition party, the Democratic Party and the Conservative Party support this, easing regulations to encourage small businesses?
Yes, this is not political issue, actually. This is more economic issue. Right. So, although bipartisan environment makes it rather, slow to pass the regulations, but in this cases, they came to an agreement to facilitate the change to promote the economy, I guess.
Right. Is this, giving small businesses a larger role in the Korean economy? Is this part of, the government's effort to have a rapid recovery from the effects of the pandemic? How do you see the Korean economy recovering from the pandemic?
Well, the large corporations, although they were hit by the impact of COVID to some extent, but they can manage themselves pretty safely so far.
Right.
The most significant blow was on the small enterprises and medium-sized enterprises. We have been acting very rapidly to mitigate these situations, and still some problems remaining, including some domestic economy, the consumer, mostly consumer economy for those mom and pop restaurants and as such. But we are recovering very fast recently with the expansion of the vaccine, providing. But the fundamental impact on the industry is Korea is no different from any other countries.
Mhm.
You know, in our country that on-tech businesses, non-contact businesses, or bio industries,
Right.
IT, they are growing very fast. You
Mhm.
know, faster than normal. But at the same time, traditional manufacturing business, you know, received a huge blow. You know, that's Korea is no exception. But we are trying to recover from that blow, and we are increasing our speed these days. So I'm very hopeful that as vaccine expansion provision is making a progress, then to the end of this year, I'm sure that we will back to normal consumer economy to some extent. So that's how I see it.
Right. Well, I see, at least internationally, in the most recent report on exports from Korea, I think they've grown at the fastest pace since 1988. So there's a lot of resiliency, a very strong rebound in that. And perhaps I've seen estimates where your GDP growth will be at least 4% this year, maybe higher, which is also above the recent historical performance before the crisis. Well, something about Korea, I've noticed watching the economy, it does have a lot of either resistance to shock or resilience from shock. So I would bet that Korea does have a relatively
that's
fast
getting
recovery.
cleared very rapidly these days.
Yeah.
You know? That's getting cleared very rapidly these days.
Right. As long as you can get some more vaccine, that'll help speed things up. And I think lately the rate of vaccination, the rollout has picked up a bit. What made headlines here in the U.S. In the past 2 weeks was that President Moon visited and had a summit with President Biden, and they pledged to deepen bilateral cooperation in many areas in technology and innovation. Which area do you think holds the greatest promise for Korean U.S. Business cooperation?
I heard that two summits has agreed to strengthening their cooperation in the area of reorganizing supply chain for the high-tech industry.
Right.
And which we welcome, you know, with our whole heart, you know, because that was the right step to do right now. And because we have Korea has a strength in manufacturing those high-tech industries.
Right.
While the US has strengths in designing IP and material equipment. So these two strengths of both nations will create great synergy, you know, by the cooperations. And that will allow the Korean corporations expand their investment in the United States, as well as the semiconductor and the battery supply chain as well. So I'm very hopeful about that collaboration announcement.
Right. And some of these areas were, of course, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, next generation mobile technology, 6G, and even space exploration, the creation of a U.S. ROK, joint space exploration. So those are new areas. So the leading ROK companies, they announced $25 billion in new investment at the summit. I understand when you participated in the 2017 summit with President Moon and then former President Trump, there was something like 12.5 billion pledged. And looking at the data, actually more than 13 billion in Korean investment came into the U.S. foreign direct investment in the year 2017, which was a stellar performance, much greater than the previous years. I think in the U.S., this will create a lot of jobs and really help cement the bilateral business relationship between Korea and the U.S. Let me see. So actually, I just have one more question, Chairman Park, and that is the Korea Society has played a role for more than 60 years, since 1957, in furthering the understanding, awareness, and cooperation between the people of Korea and America. What specific roles could you recommend for the Korea Society to play in the future? I mean, in this age of heightened international rivalry, pandemic challenges, and also the rise of Korea's soft power.
Well, the geopolitical situations around Korean Peninsula is a bit difficult, as you all know.
Mm-hmm.
This situation cannot be rectified by any effort of one individual or one nation only. It requires a multi-faced and many participants related to this Korean Peninsula situation. Korea and United States are sharing the same history and memories. And also we are part of the alliance sharing the same value of freedom and democracy. And because of that, and the close cooperation between Korea and United States is very important to solve many and various international problems of societies. And I hope that Korea society play a role of the bridge between the cooperation between these two nations. And also, I would like to see the Korea society contribute more on the relaying the value of Korea, in this role. Personally, I have a memory of visiting Pyongyang and Baekdusan in 2018. At that time, we were very hopeful about the collaboration between the two economies and also the peace between North and South, so that we can both prosper under that peaceful environment.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't go as planned at that time. But I still do have the memories of that hope at that time. Mm-hmm. So I hope that the Korea society can play a role of bring back that peaceful hope in Korean Peninsula.
Mm. So you visited Kumgangsan right after the Peace Olympics in Pyeongchang in 2018. Is that what you?
Yeah, I was part of the summit announcement and dinner at the DMZ in April, and also in that coming fall, I visited part of the delegation, including President Moon Jae-in, to Pyongyang and Baekdusan.
Right. Unfortunately, nothing really developed from that, as you said. But efforts, I hope, are continuing. I was reading something about the Korea Society's history way before my time here. There was also a lot of hope back in 2008 when the Korea Society helped organize a concert in Pyongyang by the New York Philharmonic. But unfortunately, that did not lead to more cultural exchanges between North Korea and the United States. Well, I know President Moon is trying very hard to bring North Korea into the international community to improve relations, not only between North and South Korea, which are preeminent, but also between the U.S. and North Korea.
The progress is not up to our satisfaction. We all know that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as we all know, a drop of water, if it consistently continues, can break the rock. Mm-hmm. So every effort counts in this issue. I'm hoping for the peaceful result.
Yeah, I think we all are. So I think none of us are ready to throw in the towel and give up, but to continue to work on improving relations between North Korea and South Korea and North Korea and the United States. Well, thank you for sharing your time with the Korea Society, Chairman Park, and I wish you the best in your future activities in Korea.
Thank you. It was my pleasure and wish you the best.